When I quit smoking back in December, I went on an impulse purchase of books and I decided to buy a bunch of books about Star Trek, specifically the original series. I mean, I grew up with that as a kid. And now, since the packages have been arriving fast and furious, I do have to read these books. And I am reading The Longest Track by Grace Lee Whitney. Grace Lee Whitney played Yeoman Janice Rand. She was ignominiously pushed off the show after some incident that she alludes to with the executive who sexually assaulted her. And shortly after that, she was pushed off the show. Now, I don't know if this was Roddenberry or somebody else. It's not our right to know. But what did happen because of this is, well, Grace Lee Whitney became an alcoholic and became hooked on diet pills because the producers pressured her to stay thin, even though she looked great on the show. You really get a sense in reading this book that Grace Lee Whitney deeply cared about the role, loved Yeoman Rand, and was really going to do everything possible to make this character rich. But these uninventive men who ran the fucking show didn't do that. And I want to tell you what a bastard Gene Roddenberry is, because this is the overwhelming conclusion that I am drawing from reading all of these Star Trek books. So, in the first season of the original series, John D.F. Black was the rewrite man and producer. He rewrote all the scripts for the first 15 episodes. And Gene Roddenberry decided to play a prank on him. He had Majel Barrett, who of course he was hooked up with at that particular point, go into John D.F. Black's office and start taking off her clothes and saying, "Oh, I'll do anything for a role." And then everyone stormed in, and John D.F. Black was humiliated. Well, this book not only brings that particular anecdote up, but also offers another one in which Gene Roddenberry tried the exact same fucking thing to Grace Lee Whitney shortly after Star Trek Phase 2, the aborted TV series, became Star Trek the Motion Picture. He had Grace Lee Whitney, who was a recovering alcoholic, who was staying sober. She was on dope at that particular point, but she was staying largely sober and trying to rebuild her life. Gene Roddenberry says, why don't you get dressed up like a tramp or a hooker and go in to Robert Wise's office. Robert Wise, the respected director of West Side Story and The Sound of Music, who was at the helm of Star Trek the Motion Picture. Why don't you pretend to be a fucking tramp or a hooker to him? And she did that. Robert Wise was not amused in the slightest. Gene Roddenberry thought this was hilarious. And during the shooting of Star Trek the Motion Picture, Grace Lee Whitney was mortified. Robert Wise referred to her as Sarah Lee, like she was a fucking cheesecake, even though reading this book, it's very clear she had passion and she had intelligence and she had a lot more going on than the thankless role offered her. And Roddenberry's terrible manipulation of Grace Lee Whitney just makes me so fucking furious. Not only did he take advantage of a woman who was on the rebound, who was talented, who was writing songs for all of the cast during the shooting of Star Trek the Motion Picture, but he also fucking did this thing with Robert Wise and pitted Robert Wise against her. Like, you know, as a prank. Gene Roddenberry was such a horrible misogynistic figure to do this to John D.F. Black and then later on to Grace Lee Whitney. And if he is I would not be surprised if he is the fucking executive who Grace Lee Whitney does not name, because there are a lot of fucking parallels to Gene Roddenberry's wife and the executive. And it really fucking pisses me off because reading this book, I'm thinking, man, yeah, Yeoman Janice Rand could have been a much richer character. She was going to be in the Helen Noel role in Dagger of the Mind. Did you know that? I did not fucking know that. And it's backed up by the Cushman book. That would have been very interesting, and that would have pushed Rand into a greater figure among the cast. But you've got uninventive, sexist men. And I feel bad for Grace Lee Whitney, although, look, she ended up living very long. She ended up living very well. And she got herself clean and sober. But that's Hollywood in the 60s and the 70s. And it just really angers me. Don't make Gene Roddenberry some great figure. This man was a manipulative, abusive monster. Really.